War. War never changes.
Some kind of war junkie?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Welcome to the War 102 podcast, where we explore the doctrine, theory, philosophy, and history of warfare. I'm your guide, Paul Darling, and I want to share what I learned in nearly 30 years in uniform. So let's get to learning about the most influential activity in human history, war. Welcome to episode 61, the wars you didn't know about. It is getting impossible to talk about ancient history when modern history is changing day by day, so maybe a good time to talk about peace in our time with a little bit of specificity over the new. And there are air quotes when I say this, peace between Congo and Rwanda. First thing to remember is there are approximately 30 armed conflicts ongoing globally right now. I don't feel bad if you can't name them all. Some of these conflicts are decades old. The good news is that any one of these could have a temporary peace for the right price. With apologies to Megadeth, peace sells and Trump is buying. This isn't a bad thing, but peace is relative without an understanding of the grand strategies and demographic realities, which usually only the people actively involved actually know about. A good example is the Iran-Israel conflict. Only hours after peace was declared, the Ayatollah, predictably, announced that America and Israel were defeated and that the final battle to destroy both is at hand. Likewise, the restart of their nuclear program. So much for that. Not that all is negative. I am strongly optimistic that the Abraham Accords between Israel and the various Gulf Arab states will endure for the foreseeable future. The peace between Israel and its immediate neighbors, Jordan and Egypt, have proven long-lived, though the brief period when the Muslim Brotherhood controlled Egypt certainly threatened that peace. Returning to our initial discussion on the levels of war and specifically grand strategy. Grand strategy requires either a cultural acceptance or an incredibly stable government. So in the case of Egypt and Jordan, the peace has endured because the government has endured. The cultures of both countries are in fact hostile to the idea of peace with Israel. But as long as my fellow War College alum Al-Sisi in Egypt and the Hashemites in Jordan endure, so shall the peace. On the Israeli side, while the governments may fluctuate from Likud to Labor and various other offshoots, culturally, the Israeli people want peace. So on that side as well, the peace is maintained. The Gulf Arabs likewise have a hostile population that has little sway over the monarchies ruling them. So the possibility for enduring peace is there. Lebanon and Syria are question marks. The Sunni and Christian populations would probably be fine with peace with Israel, as they see the Shia-dominated Hezbollah as the far greater enemy than Israel. Syria's new government is, on paper, committed to the Muslim Brotherhood's dream of destroying Israel. The question becomes whether its new dictator, currently known as Ahmed Hussein al-Shara, but better known by his nom de guerre, Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, is a religiously motivated jihadist or an opportunistic pragmatist. Currently it appears the latter, but time alone will tell. His new and very weak government needs friends, and the price of Gulf Arab oil money support may be a pacifist attitude towards the little Satan. Considering his resume as an al-Qaeda fighter against American forces in Iraq, the bet can go either way, and I refuse to make the call one way or the other. We may or may not be thankful we didn't kill him when American forces captured him in 2006. The point to all this is the conditions for lasting peace in lands where war is the most common state is a particular set of conditions, mostly demanding a strong, stable government or a strong, stable population, either or committed to peace. Which brings us to the roughly 30-year-old conflict between Congo and Rwanda, and, most importantly, the various proxies involved. It is little surprise that the date of the commencement of hostilities matches the various parts of the Rwandan civil war pitting Tutsis against Hutus. While that civil war could be a discussion for an entire series of podcasts, suffice to say that the ultimately vanquished Hutu leadership fled to neighboring Congo to the west. For the purposes of this podcast, I will simply refer to the Democratic Republic of Congo, previously known as Zaire, as the Congo. This is the second largest nation in Africa by population and itself no stranger to strife, owing not least of all to its massive cultural diversity with over 200 official languages being spoken. The return of the name Congo from Zaire itself is a result of the instability brought on by the Rwandan Civil War, as Mobutu Sese Seko, who renamed Congo to Zaire following his victory and 20-year dictatorship, was overthrown after a brutal and seemingly endless civil war which claimed millions of lives. The current leader, Felix Tshisekedi, is the first elected leader in its history. taking over in 2018. He retains power after killing a political rival who attempted a coup only a few years ago. I suspect his suspect electoral victory will prove to be the last election for quite some time in the Congo. Also important to note that outside Congo's army, there are over 100 armed groups operating throughout the country. Tshisekedi is all too happy to negotiate a peace he is powerless to enforce, which I suspect will be the case. The primary source of the specific conflict is the region of North Kivu, which has a large proportion of Tutsis and Hutus, many of the latter having fled from Rwanda. The primary belligerent from the Tutsi side is not Rwandan armed forces, but the rebel group. Some may say with justification proxy, the March 23rd movement, better known as M23, part of the Congo River Alliance, a collection of 10 or so armed groups operating in the eastern Congo and led by Cornelia Nangaa, who certified Tshisekedi as president, despite believing he actually lost the election. So, as with so many other conflicts, this current peace deal looks amazingly a lot like the peace between the United States and Pakistan during the war in Afghanistan. Rwanda is free to declare peace while supporting, with varying degrees of transparency, the actual groups doing the fighting. To the point of the latest Trump peace victory, the Congo River Alliance didn't accept the peace deal, so there is no peace. This comes down to one of the fundamental facts of war. It takes only one side to wage war, but it takes all sides to make peace. And with cross-border wars, with quasi-independent proxies, actual independent guerrilla bands, and most importantly, international borders drawn with zero regard to tribal realities, you have a nearly impossible situation for lasting peace. To divert a bit from the specifics of the symbolic new peace implausibly forged between Rwanda and Congo, the conflict highlights one of the hypocrisies of the anti-colonial movement. With breathless and understandable fervor, all the post-colonial governments have decried every single aspect of the European colonial experiment save one, the borders. And it is precisely this part of colonialism that is the most destructive to lasting peace. Very rarely did the Europeans have any regard for the actual realities on the ground as far as tribal affiliations. Congo is a case study in this, with its 200-plus distinct languages. But for Belgium, the people were irrelevant. It's the land that matters. Rwanda, conversely, actually has a homogeneous population linguistically and genetically. The much spoken of Hutu-Tutsi violence is between two populations that are effectively identical. They speak the same language and genetically come from essentially the same Bantu haplogroups. The difference is more caste than tribal. The original Belgian colonialists defined Tutsis as those over 6 feet tall and owning more than 10 cows. Intermarriage between Tutsis and Hutus was very common. Perhaps it is the familiarity that led to the viciousness of the Civil War. Like many of the Bantu tribes, they lived through pastoral herding, meaning migrations. This accounts for one of the 600 Bantu-derived languages being spoken by nearly 30% of Africans, with Swahili being the most common derivative. These migrations inevitably led to cross-border populations often ruled nominally or ruthlessly by non-related and hostile tribes, such as the case in the Congo. A natural thought would be to divide these artificially constructed countries into smaller entities, reflecting linguistic, cultural, and genetic differences. However, this would prove impossible, in spite of the huge landmass of Africa. There are around 2,000 distinct living languages in Africa, with more than 3,000 tribes. What's worse, these tribes are not inherently in one location, owing to the pastoral or hunting-gathering lifestyles which demand constant movement. It is impossible to replicate the Westphalian nation-state in Africa while maintaining any sort of national identity. Instead, you are left with brutal dictatorships or failed states ruling a capital city and surrendering the countryside to tribal warlords. So to the point of this specific war, within the Congo, you have varying groups that have not agreed to lay down their arms, even if the two countries have. The worst of the fighting undoubtedly occurred during the chaos of the 90s in conjunction with the civil war in Rwanda, with fleeing Hutus meeting Tutsis living in then eastern Zaire. The violence was indiscriminate, with armed groups seeking out civilians for rape, murder, and slavery. It's impossible to say there was any strategy driving the tactics, but simply violence against tribal and political enemies for its own sake. There is an aspect of retribution in the most recent iteration. Since 2018, the fall of the previous dictatorship under Mobutu Sese Seko was unquestionably only done because of the hard fighting of the Tutsi population in Congo. but they were largely excluded from the most recent government despite facilitating a peaceful transfer of power. The M23 group currently controls most of North Kivu, so the real question is whether the peace treaty assumes the Congolese army will give de facto sovereignty to the heart of the Tutsi guerrilla group or will challenge it by violence. If the latter, the ceasefire is writ in water. Rwanda will support their fellow Tutsis if they are attacked. My suspicion is that the Congolese government will wait to ensure the financial payoff, but that comes with complications. Part of Trump's deal talked about minerals from the Congo. Well, the primary mineral Congo exports is coltan, and coltan is primarily mined in North Kivu, and North Kivu is controlled by M23, the Tutsi-led group that notably did not sign on to the peace treaty. So is Congo going to do a profit sharing with what they described as a terrorist group? Is M23 going to share the territory they have with the Congo? Keep in mind, sharing a border with Rwanda, controlled by their fellow Tutsis, who also sell coltan, allows them to bypass the Congolese government and still sell the mineral. As a side note, coltan is used in every cell phone made today and in nearly all electronic equipment, and Congo supplies 20% of the mineral worldwide. So what does all this have to do with the price of tea in China? The international playbook on Trump is being created. He's becoming a bit predictable. His international brand is as a peacemaker, so he will incentivize those who help him in that branding. This is not merely an exercise in ego. I think his desire for peace is genuine, and I fear he projects this desire onto those who have no such humanitarian instincts. In the case of Congo and Rwanda, neither believe the peace is real because several of the parties involved did not agree to it. But in the short term, they will accept the Trump-led peace initiative and, more to the point, the financial incentives it includes, and then continue doing what they were doing before. Iran just did this play, and it appears Hamas is going to try it as well. As much as Trump loves the idea of peace, he hates the idea of being proved gullible, so any breaches of the peace will be ignored. That being said, Iran's public embarrassment may have educated Trump to the realities of these ancient conflicts. As noted earlier, and I will reiterate here in closing, peace requires all parties to agree. War requires only one party to instigate. The more parties involved, the less chance for peace that exists. And, particularly in Africa, with thousands of tribes arbitrarily divided by artificial lines constructed in Europe, the innumerable parties involved makes peace nearly impossible. I sincerely hope that fighting does stop between the Tutsis and the Congolese government in Kinshasa, formerly Stanleyville. But history, demographics, geography, and economics indicates the odds are poor. I won't even pretend to know what next week's episode will be, but I hope you will join us nonetheless. Thanks for listening today. If you want to help the show, please share today's episode on any social media sites you can. Check out the War 102 Buzzsprout website for more information and to send me a message. And, of course, my thanks to the subscribers who help keep the show going. Hope you all join me next week. See you soon.